All right, let's get started. We're in part 2 of a series called Just Sayin, The Power of Words. And the whole premise behind this series is that, and we're trying to prove a point here, and the point is this, that our words matter. It matters. Sometimes we say things beneath our breaths, or we say things as a reaction to certain things, or we say things that we wish you could take back. Our words matter. Here's an example, and this is like an embarrassing story, and I want to start by, embarrassing myself. But when I was at UCLA, so this is like back at, probably around like the year 2000-ish, around the year 2000, so, quarter of a century ago. UCLA had this thing where if you had your Bruin card, your ID card, you get to ride the Blue Bus as much as you want for free. And so I realized, because I stayed in dorms, but for part of my time at UCLA, I also commuted. I thought, I could save on parking if I just park somewhere else and then take the Blue Bus to campus. So I did that for a while. So the bus will start from, on my way back, the bus will start from right in front of UCLA. I'll take the Blue Bus, and it'll take me all the way down Westwood Boulevard, and then I will get off somewhere around the mall, where Pico is. Back then it was called the West Side Pavilion, right? You guys know what I'm talking about? What is it called? It's not even a mall. What is it now?
It's UCLA.
Oh, well, what do you know? It's UCLA now. Okay. Anyways, because I catch the bus from the end terminal, that means I get to pick my seat, right? Because they're all open, so I sit down. But as you go down Westwood, more and more people hop on the bus, and then eventually people are standing. But I will always keep my eyes open and make sure that there's people who need the seat more than I do, because I'm tired and my feet are sore. But if there's like a senior citizen, I'll be like, oh, please have my seat, right? And one day I was sitting there and I was tired, my feet were sore like it usually is. And then I saw this lady come on and she was wobbling on, holding her stomach. And I thought, oh man, please have my seat, right? And she was like, oh, thank you, dear. I'm like, yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Yes, please have a seat. And so I'm standing next to her. She's sitting down. I'm holding onto the whatever you call that, the hand thing. And I thought, I was nice enough to give up my seat. Why not go an extra step further by being nice by starting a conversation? So I said, oh, so when's the baby due? And then you know how the story ends. Okay. Okay. And then her smile turned to a frown and she was like, I'm not pregnant. And I thought, oh. And then next stop, I didn't have to get off, but I had to get off. And then I caught the next bus and I continued my journey. That was around the West Side Pavilion, now UCLA area. But, our words matter, right? It could make somebody's day. It could also ruin somebody's day. It could ruin your own reputation. It could make you get off the bus when you don't have to. It could change a lot of things. If you think about it, a lot of good things in this world start with words, and a lot of bad things in this world start with words. By certain words spoken, you could start a whole campaign. With certain words, you could end your career in politics, right? With a few words, you could start a war. With a few words, you could end a war. So words are very powerful. And I realize that as I'm speaking right now, that I have to be careful, very careful of the words I use. And a lot of times I don't. And so this sermon is more for me. I think I shared this with you last week, that this sermon is more for me than it is for you. But what I'm talking about today, about how our words matter, what I'm going to talk about today is going to sound like great advice. But what I'm here to tell you is that if you call yourself a Jesus follower, this is not advice. This is something that is required by all followers of Jesus. And we'll talk more about that at the end of the sermon, why that is. So if you were here with us last week, you'll know that we started this series. And last week we talked about the what. There we go, what, right? What is it that God wants us to do? And to talk about what it was, here's a quick recap. We looked at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. This is what it says. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen, right? He's saying, make sure you use edifying words, because words could build up a person or it could tear down a person. So make sure you use the right words. And that was the what. And if this whole sermon series was about the what, it would have been a one-part series, and it would have lasted 10 minutes, and that would have been it, right? Because here's the verse. Just go and do it. But we went further last week, and we went to the second part, which is the why. And if you remember what we talked about, Paul goes on to talk about, Paul wrote Ephesians. Paul went on to talk about how God is working on every single human being to make them more and more into the person that they were meant to be, right? God has an image of who you're supposed to be, right? There's a version of me that I am not right now. And God is working through the Holy Spirit. He's building me up to become the person I'm supposed to be. But the people around me can help me in that process of becoming the person I'm meant to be, or they could pull me away from the person I'm meant to be. So here's a quick recap of last week. The why is that the Holy Spirit is building you up into the person you were meant to be. And now you could either be a part of that process by speaking words that build me up into that person, or you could use your words in a way that pull me away from the person I'm meant to be. Paul uses the words, you could be grieving the Holy Spirit if you use the wrong words. So words are very powerful. Now, how powerful is it? Well, there's another verse I found. It's in Proverbs. Proverbs is a list of like good advice, okay? If the world worked perfectly, the book of Proverbs is what would be all you need, okay? So here it is. This is from the Message. I like the Message translation because it uses like regular street words. This is how it goes. Words satisfy the mind as much as fruit does the stomach, right? So on a hot day, you're like sweaty, you're tired, and then somebody gets you like sliced watermelon, and you eat it, and you're like, oh, that is so good, so satisfying. It's like that is the feeling that your mind goes through when you hear good words, right? Good talk is as gratifying as a good harvest. It's like, yes, it's just so satisfying. And then, in case you don't know exactly what this means, the person who wrote this continues. He says this, words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. Well, how can we be sure which one it is? Is it good or is it bad? How do we know? And he says this, it's your choice. You choose. You get to choose how you use your words to build somebody up, to tear somebody down, okay? So, for the last week, we talked about the what, the why, and today we're gonna be focusing on the how. This is application. Now, for those of you who are like, I hate the Bible because it's just so confusing, well, here it is, okay. After that verse I just shared with you right now, we're not using the Bible today. And the rest of you are like, whoa, we're in a church, we're not using the Bible. Okay. Okay. Every culture is different, okay? And so in the biblical times, the latest book in there was written 2,000 years ago. It spans all the way back 3,500 years. It's like crazy, right? There's different cultures, but none of those cultures are our culture. And so the way that we apply this truth will look different in every culture. And unfortunately, it's going to be really hard to find verses in the Bible that pertain to our specific situation. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you some things that I have picked up along my journey, and I understand that a lot of you have a lot more wisdom than I do. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you two dynamics that determine what people hear regardless of what we say. I'm going to share two things that I've picked up, not just in my life of, my 45 years of existence, because I know many of you have lived longer than me and you have way more wisdom than me, okay? So I should be listening to you, but I have the mic. So this is what I'm talking about. Like if I were to sit down in a circle and had a conversation and everybody's like, please share with me one story or one piece of wisdom that you want to share with everybody else about the power of words. That is something that you want to write in a book, bind it together, and just read it over and over because it's going to help all of us. Today, I want to share with you two things that I've learned from my own personal experience and also from my 20 years of pastoring, okay? So here are some stories that I picked up, and I'm not going to use anybody else's story. I'll be using my own story so that I'm not using somebody else's, and I didn't even ask them if I could use it. So I'm just going to use my own story. So here's the first one. Our words don't hold the same weight. This is the first thing that I think that is very important for us. If we're going to be using words to build somebody up or tear somebody down, we want to make sure that when we say something, okay, that these words that we say matches the intention behind it, Have you ever said something to somebody with good intention, just like me on the bus? Like my intention was good, but it was not received well. You know what I'm talking about? Because people cannot read your mind. People cannot read your heart. They don't know the intention behind what you're saying. Even if somebody says it with a smile, or even if they say, my intentions are good, they might not trust you when you say that your intentions are good, right? So you just don't know what the intention is, right? So the first thing we need to know is that our words don't hold the same weight. So I'll give you an example of this. How many of you guys have heard these words? I'm so proud of you. Some people heard this and they hold on to it for the rest of their lives. But there are also people who have never heard this, and that has weighed heavy on their hearts for a very long time. This is a good example of positive words building you up, right? But what about the negative, like this? You embarrassed me today. Which one's weightier? Which one sticks with you longer? Or maybe another positive one. How about this? I wouldn't miss it for the world. Maybe you've been playing a sport or you play an instrument and you've been working really hard and you know you just want to be good at it, right? But deep down in your mind, in your heart, you know you were doing it for somebody and you want to have that person show up at your recital or at your sports event. And they tell you, I wouldn't miss it for the world. And they kept that promise. That will weigh heavy on your heart in a good way, right? Or maybe you were in middle school, and then there's this girl you liked, and you're like, okay, I need to tell her how I feel, and right? You're like getting nervous, and you're like, I need to practice in the mirror. It's like, hey, I kind of like you. Okay, this is so weird. I'm getting sweaty, right? And then you muster up all the courage and tell your best friend, and your best friend's like, you could do this, Kotz, you could do it. It's not about me, by the way, but just like you could do this, you could do this. This other person named Kotz, you could do it. And then you get up there and right about, what you can't just jump right into it. So you start off with like, so, we've been good friends. And then at that moment, before you could say what you're about to say, this is what you hear. You're more like a brother to me. And that weighs heavy, doesn't it? Right? Or maybe it's you've been working at a company for a long time and you poured your heart and soul into it. And then one day you hear these words, you're not needed here anymore. See, some words are heavier than others. And particularly, I want to focus on this, negative words weigh more than positive words. And I want to add one more thing to this. Regardless of our intentions. There's this thing that I learned. I don't know if this is only in the church world or if this is everywhere else because, I don't know. But it's called like a praise sandwich where you say some like really good things and then you give the criticism and then you give some other good things. So it's like a sandwich, right? I don't know if that works. People tried it on me. I don't think it works. But I read this article that said that, and this is from a study done in business context, okay? It says that you need 5 to 9 positive words and comments to counterbalance one negative comment. 5 to 9. But that's in a business context. Like, when we work, we have our own, we have our business, our professional life over there, and we have our private life over here, right? And when it comes to over there, you don't put yourself out there too much, like your private life. So 5 to 9 might work. 5 to 9 positive words might work. But in your private life, in the relationships that you care about most, 5 to 9 doesn't cut it, does it? You need like 10, maybe 20. But this is what I learned over years, okay? It's not a checklist. It's not that like, well, okay, let's see, I gave him like 5 positive comments. I'm going to give you 15 more positive comments before I get to the criticism. It doesn't work like that. It's not like, I did 20. Why are you offended? I just gave you 20 compliments, right? It doesn't work that way. Because these positive comments is actually supposed to contribute to something, which is trust. You see, if I spent my whole life pouring into my family, saying good things and encouraging things, when I come into that context and give them one critical comment, they already know, like if I were to talk to my kids, Dad is always for me. So what if he's about to tell me right now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Like he's not trying to hurt me, right? But we heard these words before. We all been on the receiving end of this. We've heard words that are critical, right? We've heard words that are cynical, and we have heard words that are comparison. Why can't you be more like that person? And now, I don't know, maybe when you were younger, your parents told you these things. And every time you look in the mirror, it's all you see. Because these words weigh heavy. Even if we do give the benefit of the doubt in terms of like, what are your intentions? Were your intentions to build me up? Okay, fine. But it still weighs heavy on me. So, next. The intentions behind your words is meaningless if trust isn't established in the relationship. You need to have that trust. I'm going to give you a personal story. About when I was I can't remember exactly how old. I was in Japan. I was there with my mom. It was I think between 5 and 7 years old. We were walking on the streets, on the side street in Japan. And, being a 5 or 7 year old, I was just like acting like a fool, right? Like just messing around, running around, shouting and doing all those things. And then my mom pulled me aside and, she squatted down and she looked at me and, at that point in the story, you should already know what the mom is going to say to the son, right? And I, as a 5 to 7 year old, I knew it too. I'm like, okay, she pulled me aside. I know what she's going to do. She's going to tell me to stop doing that because it's rude or whatever, right? That's probably what you would think. But when she pulled me aside, what she told me was, stop it, which I expected. And then she said, what if somebody sees you? Now, she probably didn't think that through. I'm sure she didn't mean to say what I thought she said. How I interpreted that comment was, Katz, you embarrass me. I'm pretty sure she didn't mean that. The reason I gave her the benefit of the doubt is because I know she loves me and she wants to build me up. But she slipped and she probably said, what if somebody sees you? I interpret that as, you embarrass me. I took that to heart. And for the following years, not just days, years, I carried that with me. When my mom walked down the street, I will always walk a few steps behind because I felt so bad that when I'm with my mom, that I would be an embarrassment to her. I carry that with me. And every time I'm at school and I felt like, oh no, I got a bad grade on a test, I would hide it because I didn't want anybody to know. Like, I would show my mom my grade, right? But I would not show anybody that might have a connection to my mom. Because what if so-and-so's mom found out that I got a bad grade and it's a reflection of who she is? So I wanted to make sure, and I lived my whole life, not my whole life, but the majority of my life thinking, I'm an embarrassment to my parents. You see, I have a good relationship with my mom right now. But the reason I carried all that is because even if I knew that her intentions were good, her negative words had this impact on my heart. It just weighed heavy on me, very, very heavily on me. So, we've all said negative things to people, even with the best intentions, but it wasn't received well, right? And this is why we have to practice using positive words and using constructive words. And in order to do this, we need to have a lot of self-control. We have to be able to control our tongue. We have to be aware of what we're about to say, right? Sometimes when I try to make a point to my kids, I use sarcasm. And what I've learned over the years is that sarcasm will not toughen up your kids. And what I heard from other people who have older kids, who are now adults, what I heard from them is that, they told me this, using sarcasm, it will just make it more difficult for you to connect with your kids in the long run. But why do we do this? Why do we use the wrong words when we try to, when we talk to other people? And this is what I've discovered, that most of us are more focused on what we need to say more than on what others need to hear. I mean, isn't that true? I need to get this off my chest. I need to tell so-and-so. I need to make sure I do this, right? Meanwhile, we're not really thinking, well, is this what they really need to hear? So, the first point. Our words don't hold the same weight. No one ever, in the years I've been a pastor, I have not met anyone who says the root of my problems is having too much encouragement from my parents. I've never heard anybody say that, but I have heard so many stories of how one comment from their parents has haunted them for a very, very long time. Second point. Source determines weight. Source determines weight. And what I mean by this is this, okay? So I used this example with my wife yesterday, and she was like, I don't know if that's true, but here, let me see if this works for you guys. Okay. So let's just say you're the mom of the family, and you're going to go out with your girlfriends to go have a night out in the town or whatever, right? And so you're like, I need to dress up. I'm going to buy a dress or whatever. You wear your clothes, and then you go out. And then the minute your friends see you, they're like, oh my gosh, you look so good. You know, like, look at that dress. It's so you, whatever. Okay, that. I've never been a part of that scene, so I don't know what people usually say. And then you come home. And then your 17-year-old daughter sees you wearing what you're wearing, and she's like, Mom, that is the best dress I've ever seen, and you wear it so good. I got to take a picture and send it to my friends because you are on point. You're like, what words do you guys use? You have Riz. Is that right? Did I use that right? No? You are fire? Is that right? Okay, whatever it is, right? Now, your friends out in town, their words weigh differently from what your teenage daughter said about what you're wearing. Even though they said the same thing, kinda, right? They have different weight because source determines weight. What one person says and another person says, if it's the same thing, one person's words will have heavier weight than others. And the reason for that is because your relationship with someone is rarely the same as the relationship they have with you. My relationship with my son, which is father to son relationship, is not the same as my son's relationship with me, the son to father relationship, right? As a matter of fact, this parent and child relationship is something that we have to be very careful of because what I would say to him, right, if I would just repeat the words that he said to me to him, it would have a different weight than, right, than like if you were to say it to me and I say it to him, they have different weight because the relationship is different. Another relationship would be like teacher and student. There are things that are okay for students to say to teachers, but it is inappropriate for teachers to say to students because the relationship is different, right? In the same way, boss to employee. Sometimes in certain cultures of business, bosses like to think that their employees are friendly with them, so they must be good friends. But that's not always the case, right? Pastor to congregation, this is interesting. There are times when Lori has to remind me, remember, Kotz, you're a pastor. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, I am. It's like your words have different weight than if somebody else would have told them the same thing you're about to tell them. I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta remember that. And these are things that we forget all the time, right? Men, your words have a different weight than when women say the same thing. So be careful when you use certain criticisms. Here's an interesting thing. This is something I noticed last night as I was going to sleep. When I'm going through a really tough time, and let's just say I share with you guys, like, this is what I'm going through. Men, if you sympathize with me and you're like, oh, that's hard, Kotz, that's like a certain weight right there, right? But when women say, aw, I'm like, well, thank you. Like, I feel much better now. I don't know why. Maybe that's just me, but different weight for different people, right? So the point I'm trying to make is this. Remember who you are and what you represent to the person on the other side of you. I want to continue my story of what my mom said to me. She says something that made me think that I embarrass her. That continued through college. And then eventually I moved away from home. I moved to Northern California, not because of those words, because I felt called to go there. And when you're living by yourself for the first time, you really don't take care of yourself. Well, I don't really take good care of myself. So I started eating like whatever I could find. I skip meals when I don't feel like eating. And, I just didn't have any healthy patterns in my life. And eventually that led me to the ER. I went to the ER several times when I was living in Northern California. And I remember when it got really, really bad, I felt this pain and I couldn't do anything. And I was paralyzed because of pain. I didn't know what to do. And the people at my church at the time, I was working in a church in the Peninsula area, they were like, oh, we got to pray for Kotz. We got to pray for Kotz. We don't know what's wrong with him. The doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. So what they did was eventually they contacted my old church, which is down here in Southern California. And eventually through that chain, they were able to somehow get my parents' phone number to let them know what happened to me. So I had no intentions of calling my parents because I thought I embarrassed them. Like if my parents found out that I was in the ER, in my mind, okay, this is what I was thinking. I was thinking, when people find out that I'm in the ER, they're going to immediately think that it's because my parents didn't raise me right. And ultimately, it'll bring them shame. And I would embarrass my parents. And I didn't want to do that. So I just wanted no one to tell my parents that I was in the ER. But somehow, they got my number. They called me while I was still in the ER. And it was my dad, because my dad called me. My dad's like, hey, I heard you're sick. I'm like, well, I'm not sick. I'm just in pain. I don't know what's wrong. Like, oh. And I was so nervous talking to him because, again, I didn't want him to think that I was embarrassing them. I wasn't bringing, this is like Mulan, right? Oh, I didn't bring honor to my father, to my family, right? And I remember thinking, I can't wait for this conversation to be over because I don't want to talk to him right now. Not because I hated him, it's because I was so ashamed of myself. And as I was on the phone, I started apologizing. I said, I'm so sorry. Like, I'll do better. And my dad, and again, in the same way that my mom probably didn't mean what she said, like if I told her about it, she won't remember that she said that, right? In the same way, my dad kind of nonchalantly said something, and I don't think if I asked him about it, he would remember that he said it because it was just in passing. But he said, oh, come on, Kotz, you don't embarrass us. And at that moment, I felt this huge weight come off of me. It was over the phone. He's like, Kotz, you don't embarrass me. You don't embarrass us. And I felt like I could breathe again. The weight of his words were heavier than any other words that I heard from anybody. Because source determines weight. Source determines weight. You know, when we, for me, at least as a father, I'm always looking for ways to get the most out of my kids. I see so much potential in my kids. I want to see them grow up and meet those potential that I'm like, oh, you're capable than just what you're doing. Like you're in your bedroom and you're just doing, like you're watching videos, you're just doom scrolling on your iPad. Like I know you could do more with your time, right? And so I'm thinking when I see my kids, what I see is I see potential, right? And so I'm going to say something along the lines of, come on, you could do better with your life. But when my kids see their father come into the room, what they're looking for is not a talk about their potential. What they're looking for is that they want their dad's approval more than anything else. So I don't know, I can't speak on behalf of moms, but dads, you have such a significant role to play in your kid's life. And kids, I want to tell you this too. I know from Mother's Day and Father's Day, you're supposed to write something encouraging and give it to your parents, right? Your words of encouragement to your parents have so much weight, so much weight. If my kids one day, I'm not going to tell them to say this to me, but if one day my kids came up to me and said, you're doing a great job as a dad, I will break down and cry. Your words have so much weight. Or, okay, maybe even like, I see you're trying. Like, that would be even nice too, right? I'll take that, okay? Some kind of word of appreciation. Actually, this past month, a lot of you guys sent emails to the pastors showing your appreciation because it's Pastor's Appreciation Month, right? So I'm like, oh, cool, this is great. There was one email. Daniel, can I share? Yeah? Okay. I got an email from Daniel this past week, which was not October, but thank you anyways. And he shared this email saying, hey, like, I've known you since, like, when he was in the 6th grade. He was in my youth group. And he was talking about how, hey, remember that one time we went on this trip and then this happened and then you kind of shared a few words with me. He's like, those words still stick with me. And I can't, honestly, Daniel, I can't remember what I said that day, but you reminded me, and I'm like, oh, I said that? That sounds pretty good. But for someone who's seen me grow up as a human being, for someone that I've known for 20 plus years, for that person to say, like, you've had an impact in my life, that his words weighed a lot more than somebody I just met who might say the same thing. Because source determines weight. Source determines weight. So, review. Our words don't hold the same weight. Source determines weight. The point I hope I'm making, and like I said, if I just sat in a circle with all of you guys have a lot of wisdom. You guys could probably add more to this list. I only have 2. You could probably share a lot more. And I hope that you share those nuggets of wisdom with each other about how words matter. Because remember, our words matter. It matters so much. As Paul said in Ephesians, God is trying to build us up into the person that we're meant to be. Your words could play a role in being a part of that. Or your words could be a part of destroying somebody and pulling them away from the person that God meant for them to be. We have to know the weight of our words before we use them. Now, like I said, this, what I just shared with you, just the 2 points I shared with you, I like to think it's good advice. But if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, it is mandated. Why is it mandated? Why is it mandatory? It's because Jesus calls us to love other people in the way that he loved us. In that hospital bed, as I was sitting there, if Jesus were to walk into that room and sit next to me on that hospital bed, and he looked at me, he would have looked at me and said, "Kotz, you don't embarrass me." Those words of Jesus came through my dad over the phone. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to be the lips of Jesus, the tongue of Jesus, the voice of Jesus. In the same way that God has blessed us with his words. When he looks at us, he doesn't see our flaws. He sees who we're meant to be. And he speaks those words to us. And we, as followers of Jesus, are mandated. This is our calling, to use the words that Jesus would use on other people to build them up to the person they were meant to be. Because in that moment, through those words, you are representing Jesus to that other person. So, I have 2 questions to end this sermon. The first one is this. Is there a person you wish was more mindful of the weight of their words? You probably might be carrying those words with you right now. And now you're thinking, I wish that person understood that their words had so much weight. Had they known how heavy my words were, they would have probably been more careful. But the flip side is also true, and this is the second question. Does someone else wish you were more mindful of the weight of your words? Now, next week, we're going to be looking at the 3rd chapter of James. James talks about how our words, if we could control the words that we speak, we could pretty much control our entire body, right? So we're going to talk about that more because I know what you're thinking, because you're stuck on probably this one right here, the bottom one, right? Like, oh man, I wish I could hit a rewind button on that one and do that part over, like when I was on the bus. Like, I wish I could take those words back, right? Because we are reactionary beings. We tend to say things, and then afterwards we're like, I shouldn't have said that, right? So we're going to be talking about that next week. But I want to end this time for this week with the proverb that I started with. Words satisfy the mind as much as fruit does to the stomach. Good talk is as gratifying as a good harvest. Words kill, words give life. They're either poison or fruit. You choose. You choose. Amen.